The feds don't even have any footage that explains how exactly the rifle in particular got onto the roof.
This claim resurfaced the moment the feds discovered a hidden tunnel under the stage where Charlie Kirk got shot. And not only have they found new evidence, word is it may link us to a Tyler Robinson's accomplice. The assassination. Utah Valley University. A quiet September afternoon, students were walking between classes, the hum of traffic drifting along Campus Drive, when at 12:23 p.m., a single rifle shot split the air. That one sound ended the life of conservative activist Charlie Kirk and ignited a firestorm of confusion, panic, and theories that would spread far beyond the campus. It didn't take long before people began whispering about something almost cinematic in its mystery, a hidden tunnel beneath the stage, and a story that, they said, someone didn't want told. It was supposed to be another stop on Charlie's American Comeback College Tour, a grassroots series meant to rally students and reignite conservative energy. Kirk had been speaking about mass shootings, his final topic, when the sound of that gunshot tore through the open courtyard. Witnesses described chaos, shouting, students running, others frozen in disbelief. Within seconds, emergency radio channels came alive.
UVU in Orem has had an active shooter at the Charlie Kirk event. We're getting several calls. We're trying to get more information.
Moments later came another voice, shaky, focused.
Kirk is on top of the building on the far north side, just east of the library, wearing jeans, black shirt, black vest.
By the time those words reached dispatch, it was already too late. Kirk had been hit by a single round, 1.3006 bullet fired from a Mauser M98 rifle positioned on the roof of the Low-C Center, roughly 140 yards from the stage. The shot struck his neck, severing vital arteries. Witnesses said his body dropped instantly. His team lifted him into an SUV, racing toward Timpanogos Regional Hospital, but doctors pronounced him dead minutes later. He was 31 years old. Almost immediately, confusion gripped the scene. The shooter, where was he? Nobody seemed to know. Some thought he'd been arrested. Others said he'd fled across campus. But as the investigations continued and rumors spread among fleeing students, one phrase began echoing through the chaos. He escaped through the tunnels. At first, it seemed absurd, the kind of nervous theory people tell each other in panic. But Utah Valley University really does have tunnels. Beneath the surface, there are pedestrian walkways and maintenance conduits built decades earlier for campus infrastructure, part of everyday life for students who use them to cross busy roads. Yet in that moment of fear and uncertainty, the existence of those tunnels became something else entirely. They became the seed of a myth. Within an hour, social media was ablaze. Drone footage from above the event site added fuel to the fire. Influencers reposted aerial shots with ominous captions. They found a tunnel under the stage, one viral post claimed. The details multiplied faster than authorities could respond, and as agents swarmed the campus, sealing off roads and rooftops, online speculation took hold that a secret tunnel beneath the stage had allowed the assassin to vanish. Meanwhile, federal investigators were piecing together what actually happened. According to their findings, the shooter, 22-year-old Tyler James Robinson, arrived at UVU earlier that morning, driving a gray Dodge Challenger. He parked near the Campus Drive pedestrian underpass, a concrete walkway connecting the parking garage to the main quad. Surveillance footage shows him crossing that tunnel calmly, wearing jeans and a backpack. He then climbed to the Low-C Center roof. By 12:22 p.m., he was in position. A minute later, the fatal shot rang out. After the shooting, Robinson ran north, jumped from the roof, and disappeared briefly into a wooded area beyond campus, discarding his rifle, later found wrapped in a towel with his DNA. Footprints, palm prints, and campus camera footage all confirmed his route, forming what the New York Times later described as a precise reconstruction of his movements. But the internet wasn't waiting for official reports. The rumor had already evolved into something much larger. That same night, conservative commentator Candace Owens opened her show with breaking news that seemed to validate those suspicions.
The FBI is putting an absurd amount of pressure right now on the authorities in Utah and also the rest of the government in Utah to come out and to say that the Charlie Kirk case is closed.
Her words spread like wildfire across partisan circles. Owens claimed to have sources suggesting federal pressure to bury the truth about the case, framing it as part of a broader cover-up. Within hours, countless viewers began questioning whether the official story could be trusted. And when she described missing footage and inconsistencies in how the rifle reached the rooftop, listeners filled in the gaps themselves with tunnels. Soon, posts appeared asserting that the stage itself sat atop a hidden hatch. Others said witnesses saw dark-suited men enter neighboring service doors under the courtyard. On some corners of the internet, people began comparing the supposed tunnel system to Cold War bunkers, yet none of it aligned with reality. According to Utah Valley University's Facilities and Planning Department, there are indeed tunnels, but they're entirely mundane. The utility tunnels, constructed in the 1970s and 1980s, were built to carry steam pipes, electrical cables, and maintenance lines, accessible only to authorized staff. The pedestrian tunnels, like the one under Campus Drive, were added decades later for safety, allowing students to walk beneath traffic. It suggested conspiracy, secrecy, and a story bigger than any one man. And because the killer had vanished for more than 30 hours before turning himself in, that gap became the perfect void into which speculation poured. When reporters asked about rumors that the shooter escaped underground, investigators clarified that Robinson had used a public pedestrian underpass, not an unknown tunnel. But by then, social media had already spun those words into something sensational. The speculation reached new heights when the White House press briefing introduced another dramatic thread.
Antifa inscriptions were engraved in these bullet casings that killed Charlie Kirk. The president is designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization.
That soundbite from Washington reshaped the story once more. Now, the tunnel wasn't just an escape route, it was symbolic of something deeper. To believers, it became an underground network of radicals, a literal foundation of violence lying beneath a conservative campus event. The narrative was too striking to ignore. One side saw a political martyr, the other saw a mystery of shadows and secrets. What had started as a campus tragedy had transformed into a nationwide saga, amplified by fear, ideology, and algorithm. Candace Owens returned to the subject repeatedly in the days that followed, her tone sharpening each time.
The feds don't even have any footage that explains how exactly the rifle in particular got onto the roof.
Her emphasis on missing footage gave fuel to every theory already circulating. If the feds couldn't explain how the rifle got up there, maybe the answer was below ground. Comment sections filled with diagrams, speculation, and blurry images claiming to show sealed doors near the Low C Center. The tunnel story had metastasized, no longer just about logistics or evidence, but about faith and doubt, about who could be trusted to tell the truth. As night fell over Orem, the investigation continued under floodlights, but online, the crowd had already reached its verdict. Posts accused the university of washing away evidence. Others pointed to new pavement as proof of cover-up. Some even connected the story to older myths about LDS church tunnels and Cold War bunkers, merging fiction with fact until they were indistinguishable. By the time dawn broke, one question dominated the digital landscape: what's inside the tunnel? The shooter. By the time investigators confirmed that no secret tunnel existed beneath Charlie Kirk's stage, the public conversation had already moved on. People no longer wanted to talk about the ground below. They wanted to talk about the man behind the gun. His name was Tyler James Robinson, 22 years old, a Utah native, college dropout, and former ROTC student. To some, he was a lost young man radicalized by ideology. To others, he was a symbol, a scapegoat, or even, as some conspiracy circles claimed, a puppet. Whatever the truth, Robinson's name had become shorthand for an enigma the country couldn't stop trying to solve. In the first days after the assassination, news outlets scrambled to piece together his background. Police reports showed that he'd lived alone in a small apartment near Provo, working part-time while taking online classes. He had no prior criminal record, but his online history painted a more complicated picture. Investigators found posts on anonymous message boards referencing Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA, and deep state hypocrisy. They also found angry exchanges on X and Reddit threads tied to anti-government movements. But in the world of online commentary, those findings didn't just explain him. They were interpreted as clues to something larger. Some users claimed he was part of a sleeper cell, trained to target conservative figures. Others insisted he was a false flag, a patsy set up by intelligence agencies to stoke division ahead of the election season. The lack of immediate clarity gave everyone permission to fill the blanks with their own fears. Candace Owens became one of the earliest voices to connect Robinson's motives to what she called organized radicalism. In an episode that aired just 2 days after the attack, she framed it as part of a coordinated assault on conservative voices. For her audience, it wasn't a question of guilt, it was a question of intent. Theories spread that Robinson had ties to Antifa, citing the engraved bullet casings with leftist slogans as proof. Even after the FBI clarified that the inscriptions were personal markings with no confirmed organizational ties, the narrative had already hardened. The idea that he was part of a broader radical network had become a conviction. On the opposite side of the political spectrum, others told a different story. Progressive commentators investigators argued that Robinson represented the dark side of America's obsession with guns and celebrity politics. They painted him not as a mastermind, but as a product, a byproduct of the same polarization that had made Charlie Kirk both famous and controversial. A viral article in Vice News described him as the perfect mirror of the environment that created him, angry, disillusioned, searching for purpose in a world that rewards outrage. But that sober analysis didn't stand a chance against the louder, more theatrical theories. Within days, corners of the internet had turned Robinson into a cipher for every imaginable conspiracy. Some posts claimed that he'd been an undercover federal informant gone rogue, while others said he'd been eliminated before capture and replaced by a double. When police released photos of his arrest, skeptics compared them to older images, circling the jawline, hairline, and lighting differences as proof that they were two different men. One of the most viral videos on TikTok claimed that Tyler Robinson never existed. The creator argued that his online footprint had been fabricated by AI, a digital phantom created to absorb blame. It racked up nearly 10 million views before being taken down. Another theory accused the government of brainwashing Robinson through a psychological operation known as MK Ultra 2.0. A popular X post declared, "They don't need to fake assassinations anymore. They just flip a switch." The theories multiplied like wildfire because the real details were so limited. Robinson had left no manifesto, no recorded confession, no note. The FBI released excerpts from his devices showing scattered posts about disillusionment and anger, but nothing resembling an organized plan. That absence of motive created a void, and into that void poured speculation. To some, the lack of a clear motive was the clearest evidence of all. They said it was too clean, a professional hit disguised as chaos, wrote one user in a Telegram group that had grown to over 70,000 members within a week. They called themselves Tunnel Truthers. They believed Robinson had been chosen to take the blame for a government-orchestrated assassination intended to silence a conservative firebrand. Other, more spiritual corners of the internet turned to prophecy. A video by a Christian YouTuber with 500,000 followers claimed that Kirk's death fulfilled an Isaiah warning about false prophets and corruption within modern conservatism. They argued that Robinson was a vessel, not a villain, used by unseen forces to punish hypocrisy. The comments section filled with arguments over scripture and symbolism, over fate and free will. Meanwhile, mainstream media attempted to steer the narrative back toward verifiable evidence. FBI Director Christopher Wray announced that Robinson had acted alone, with no signs of external coordination, no second shooter, and no tunnel escape route. But by then, every official statement was interpreted as either suppression or spin. It wasn't just fringe corners either. Influencers across the political spectrum found ways to shape Robinson's story to their own ends. Some said he was a disaffected veteran betrayed by the system. Others said he was a radicalized loner pushed over the edge by online extremism, and still others painted him as a martyr to causes that existed only in comment sections. It wasn't about one man and one gun anymore. It was about a pattern. Robinson had become the ghost haunting America's ideological battleground. Conspiracy accounts began connecting his name to unrelated events. A Reddit post tied him to a missing military contractor in Nevada. A YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers claimed he'd been seen at a protest months earlier in Washington, D.C., a claim disproven by time-stamped photos showing he'd been in Utah that same day. Still, the story spread faster than corrections. Even as his family released a statement begging people to stop exploiting his name, fake accounts pretending to be his relatives emerged, each spinning a new version of reality. One viral tweet claimed to be written by his brother, insisting that Tyler had been part of a government experiment gone wrong. It wasn't true, but it didn't matter. The post was shared over 500,000 times before being deleted. In online spaces, the line between skepticism and spectacle had completely dissolved. Theories collided and overlapped, creating a web of contradictions so dense that no single truth could survive. Some believed he was a left-wing radical. Others said a right-wing double agent. Others still that he was a brainwashed pawn in a digital war between shadow factions. For investigators, the facts remained simple. Tyler Robinson bought his rifle legally. He had no accomplices. He fired one shot. He fled on foot. He was caught alive. No tunnel, no team, no cover-up. Just a young man whose anger found its target. But the internet doesn't thrive on simplicity. It thrives on drama, on suspicion, on the feeling that you're uncovering something no one else dares to say. And so, the narrative of the secret tunnel and the phantom shooter merged into one myth, an underground story not of cement and steel, but of emotion and imagination. The tunnel became a symbol for the unseen forces people wanted to believe in. Robinson became the ghost moving through it, and Charlie Kirk, in death, became the martyr who proved it all must be real. The Antifa mystery. As investigators combed through Utah Valley University, trying to piece together every movement before and after the shooting, another kind of storm was gathering above ground. It wasn't the sound of helicopters or the hum of generators, it was the roar of public outrage. Overnight, the tragedy had become more than a crime. It had become a battlefield of ideology. In Washington, D.C., the story reached the White House briefing room. Within 48 hours of the shooting, the president stood before cameras and made a declaration that would transform a campus tragedy into a national flashpoint.
Antifa inscriptions were engraved in these bullet casings that killed Charlie Kirk. The president is designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization.
The words were clear and heavy. Antifa inscriptions were engraved in the bullet casings. That single claim shifted everything. In an instant, the story was no longer about a lone shooter. It was about a network, a movement, an alleged underground army striking at conservative voices. The evidence, as later confirmed, came from the spent casings found near the shooter's position on the Low C Center rooftop. Each brass shell bore tiny etched words, faint but legible, referencing slogans tied to left-wing protest culture, phrases like Bella Ciao and Smash the System. To investigators, it was a strange, possibly performative detail, but to millions online, it was proof of motive. Conservative influencers exploded with fury. Telegram channels, podcasts, and X spaces echoed with one refrain: Antifa killed Charlie Kirk. Commenters said it was open war on conservatives. Others speculated that the attack was orchestrated, not spontaneous, that the shooter, Tyler James Robinson, was part of an organized plot to silence right-wing leaders before the 2026 elections. At first, law enforcement didn't rule anything out, but as they examined Robinson's background, the picture became more complicated. Investigators discovered that Robinson had been active in a handful of online political forums. His usernames appeared in threads discussing anarchist, literature, anti-fascist rallies, and conspiracy theories about government overreach. But he also posted on gun enthusiast boards, survivalist pages, and at times right-wing meme groups. He wasn't easily categorized. To the public, though, nuance didn't matter. The president's announcement had given the tragedy an ideological frame, and now every fact was filtered through it. On X, a post with over 3 million views read, "He wasn't acting alone. You don't etch Antifa on your bullets unless you're sending a message." That sentiment spread quickly. Within hours, hashtags like #AntifaAssassin and #KirkCoverUp began trending nationwide. Candace Owens returned to her show, visibly angry, accusing the federal government of moving too slowly to connect the dots. Her tone wasn't subtle, it was accusatory. To her millions of followers, it was confirmation that the story was being sanitized. As journalists chased the Antifa angle, a new line of speculation emerged. Maybe Robinson didn't act alone. Some pointed to the shooter's clean escape, arguing that one person couldn't have pulled it off without help. Others noted inconsistencies in early eyewitness reports, differences in the description of clothing, height, and the direction of flight. Theories multiplied. Some claimed Robinson was a plant inserted to take the fall for a coordinated cell. Others said he was a trigger, the distraction for a larger team that had already disappeared. One video that went viral on YouTube presented itself as a forensic analysis of the event, comparing echo patterns of the gunshot to suggest multiple shooters. Despite experts quickly debunking it, the clip gained millions of views and cemented the idea that the government was covering something up. Behind closed doors, the FBI and the Utah County Sheriff's Office pushed back. They released detailed ballistic analyses showing all rounds were fired from a single weapon on a single rooftop and that Robinson's fingerprints were found on the gun. DNA matched his blood on the scene. Still, the theories didn't slow. In fact, the denials became fuel. A leaked portion of the preliminary FBI report, misinterpreted by an anonymous Telegram account, claimed that Robinson had possible connections to activist organizations. That line, later revealed to refer to 2 protest groups he'd followed online, was quoted out of context across the internet. Suddenly, screenshots of that sentence appeared on every social platform with captions like "FBI confirms Antifa ties." The story deepened again when an unverified image surfaced allegedly showing Robinson at an Antifa protest months earlier in Portland. The problem: the photo was blurry, the man's face half covered, and local journalists quickly determined it was a misidentified individual. But online, the correction barely mattered. The image had already been absorbed into the legend. Each day brought a new variation. Some people swore Robinson was part of an extremist faction within Antifa trained abroad. Others claimed the opposite, that he was a government operative, deep state planted to justify the crackdown on left-wing groups. Even within conservative media, opinions split. Some outlets framed Robinson as a radicalized soldier, while others speculated that he was a pawn sacrificed by the very government now investigating his case. When Fox News aired a segment suggesting that foreign funding might have reached Antifa-affiliated groups in Utah, the story jumped borders. Commentators in the UK and Australia began covering it, turning a local tragedy into an international morality tale. Meanwhile, the official narrative grew increasingly quiet. Investigators refused to confirm or deny any ideological link. They said Robinson had acted alone, that his motives were still under review, and that speculation about accomplices was unsubstantiated. But those statements didn't stop the movement. They strengthened it. The internet began to fill with lists of supposed evidence that Robinson wasn't the shooter at all. His missing social media activity in the days before the attack, claims that his family hadn't been seen publicly since. Even body language comparisons between his mugshot and earlier photos. "Look at his eyes," one viral TikTok said. "That's not the same man." The phrase #NotTheShooter began trending alongside #WhoKilledKirk. Fact-checkers tried to push back, pointing out that the arrest footage, ballistic data, and eyewitness accounts all matched Robinson perfectly. But those corrections never reached the same audiences as the conspiracy videos. Within 2 weeks, the narrative had splintered into factions. One camp believed Robinson was an Antifa assassin, another insisted he was an innocent scapegoat, and a third claimed there was no shooter at all, that the entire scene had been staged. Through it all, one name kept circulating online, always with the same accusation: "They're hiding the real shooter." The facts didn't change, but belief had become its own reality. The tunnel story had been about what lay beneath the stage. The news story was about what lay behind the shooter's eyes. And as the nation argued over who Tyler Robinson really was, or whether he even pulled the trigger at all, the truth became just another casualty. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.